Keanu Reeves sought refuge from the relentless glare of fame in a dilapidated bar off Highway 101, a dive known as the Rusty Anchor, tucked away in a forgotten corner of Northern California where the world seemed to pause. The bar was a relic of small-town America, its interior a dim labyrinth of flickering shadows cast by weak, buzzing fluorescent lights that struggled against the darkness. The floors, sticky with years of spilled beer and grime, creaked underfoot, and the air was thick with the acrid stench of cigarette smoke that had seeped into the warped wooden walls over decades, mingling with the faint tang of stale hops. Strangers were rare in this place, their presence noted with wary glances and met with grudging tolerance, as if their arrival disrupted an unspoken pact among the regulars. Keanu, dressed in a plain black t-shirt, faded jeans that bore the wear of long rides, and a leather jacket softened by years of use, settled into a corner booth, its vinyl upholstery cracked and peeling. His motorcycle helmet rested on the scarred tabletop beside a glass of amber whiskey, its surface catching the faint glow of a neon sign outside. His Triumph Bonneville stood parked among the Harleys and choppers in the gravel lot, its sleek lines understated yet defiant amidst the ostentatious machines of the bar's rough clientele. Keanu had been riding north for 3 days, weaving through back roads and avoiding the glare of major highways, seeking the anonymity that only the open road could provide. The recent film shoot had been grueling, a marathon of intense action sequences and emotionally charged scenes that left him drained, yearning for a moment to reconnect with himself. Dive bars like the Rusty Anchor offered a temporary sanctuary, a place where he could slip into the background, unnoticed by the world that constantly watched him. The bartender, Frank, a grizzled man in his 60s with deep lines etched into his weathered face, served him without a flicker of recognition, his voice gruff but neutral as he asked what Keanu wanted to drink before retreating to polish glasses behind the bar. The handful of locals scattered across the room, their faces worn by hard lives, paid him no attention, their conversations a low murmur punctuated by the clink of bottles and the occasional cough. This suited Keanu perfectly. He craved the solitude to decompress, to find solace in the quiet of his own thoughts. He opened a dog-eared copy of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, its pages softened from years of handling, the spine creased from countless readings. The ancient philosopher's words about resilience, inner strength, and the pursuit of virtue were a lifeline, grounding him amidst the chaos of his Hollywood existence. By the dim light of the booth's overhead lamp, which flickered intermittently, he read, each passage a whispered reminder to stay centered, to find peace in the storm that often raged within. The fragile tranquility of the Rusty Anchor was shattered when the door slammed open with a force that rattled the hinges, admitting 5 members of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club. Their entrance was a tempest, a surge of leather and menace that filled the room with an electric charge, as if the air itself had thickened with the promise of conflict. Their vests bore the club's patch, a snarling wolf's head wreathed in flames, a symbol of their dominance, and their arms were canvases of tattoos that narrated tales of violence, loyalty, and lives lived on the edge. Jake Bulldog Morrison, the club's president, was a towering figure, 6'4" with a barrel chest and a wild, untrimmed beard that framed a face hardened by years of command. His presence was a storm cloud, heavy and oppressive, drawing every eye in the room. His lieutenant, Tommy Snake Rodriguez, was leaner, wiry, with a coiled tension that suggested a predator always ready to strike, his dark eyes darting with restless energy, scanning for weakness. The other 3, Rick, Danny, and Pete, moved in their wake like loyal hounds, their postures radiating the confidence of men who believed they owned every space they entered, their gazes sweeping the bar for any hint of disrespect. Bulldog's voice boomed across the room, a gravelly command that cut through the low hum of conversation like a blade. "Set us up with a round, Frank. We're celebrating." The bartender moved swiftly, his hands steady despite the faint tremor in his shoulders, his familiarity with the Iron Wolves evident in his quick compliance. He knew their reputation for violence, their history of turning the Rusty Anchor into a stage for their dominance. The other patrons shrank into themselves, their movements cautious, their eyes fixed on their drinks as they avoided contact, hoping to remain invisible. The bikers had claimed this bar as their territory years ago, their presence a shadow that loomed over every interaction, enforced through intimidation and occasional brutality. They were fresh off a successful drug run, their pockets heavy with illicit cash, their blood heated with cheap liquor and the thrill of unchecked power. They sprawled across the bar stools, their laughter loud and abrasive, filling the room with the swagger of men who answered to no one, their voices echoing off the grimy walls as they recounted their exploits. Snake's sharp eyes swept the room and landed on Keanu, alone in his corner booth, engrossed in his book, his posture calm and unyielding despite the chaos of their entrance. There was something about the stranger's quiet confidence, the way he sat unbothered, turning a page with deliberate care, that grated on Snake's nerves. Perhaps it was the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way his hands rested lightly on the table, or the complete absence of fear in his demeanor, a silent refusal to acknowledge the biker's dominance. "Hey, Bulldog," Snake said, elbowing his leader with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Check out the bookworm in the corner." Bulldog turned, his massive frame swiveling on the bar stool, his eyes narrowing as he took in Keanu's unassuming figure, the black t-shirt and leather jacket, the motorcycle helmet that suggested he was no stranger to the road. The stranger's lack of reaction, his complete indifference to their raucous arrival, was an affront in their world, where respect was demanded and fear was the currency of power. "Looks like we got ourselves a college boy," Bulldog sneered, his voice dripping with contempt, his words carrying across the bar like a challenge. "Probably lost, looking for Starbucks." The comment drew coarse laughter from Rick, Danny, and Pete, their amusement echoing off the walls, a chorus of mockery that filled the room with tension. Frank, sensing the brewing storm, tried to intervene, his voice low but firm as he wiped down the bar with a rag that had seen better days. "He's just passing through, Jake. Hasn't caused any trouble." But Snake's tone carried an ominous edge, a single word that hung in the air like a warning shot. Yet, the Iron Wolves didn't tolerate outsiders, especially those who seemed educated or refined, their presence a perceived slight against the gang's hard-earned authority. In their experience, such people looked down on bikers, saw them as criminals or degenerates, and the gang had developed a hair-trigger sensitivity to any hint of condescension. What they didn't know was that the man in the corner booth had spent years training in martial arts, firearms, and tactical combat for his John Wick films, his body a finely tuned instrument of controlled violence. Beneath his calm exterior lay muscle memory honed through countless hours with stunt coordinators and military advisors, skills that blurred the line between performance and reality, making him far more dangerous than his unassuming appearance suggested. Keanu finished a paragraph, his eyes briefly meeting Bulldog's across the smoky room, acknowledging the biker's presence without fear or challenge, a fleeting glance that conveyed neither submission nor provocation. Then he returned to his book, turning a page with the same deliberate calm, a gesture that was both respectful and dismissive, stoking the gang's irritation. The Iron Wolves, emboldened by liquor and the high of their successful run, were spoiling for a fight, their blood up, their inhibitions drowned in alcohol. Keanu, with his quiet demeanor and ancient philosophy book, had unwittingly become their target, a symbol of everything they resented: education, restraint, a world beyond their control. Snake made the first move, grabbing his beer bottle and swaggering to the booth, his boots clicking deliberately on the sticky floor, each step a calculated attempt to intimidate, the sound echoing in the now hushed bar. "What you reading there, Professor?" he asked, leaning against the booth with feigned casualness, his breath heavy with the sour reek of alcohol and cigarettes, his bloodshot eyes glinting with malice, a predator testing his prey. Keanu looked up, his expression unruffled, his dark eyes steady despite the provocation. "Marcus Aurelius, Ancient Philosophy," he said evenly, his voice low but clear, carrying a quiet authority that seemed to fill the space between them. Snake repeated the words mockingly, raising his voice for his brothers to hear, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Well, ain't that fancy? We got ourselves a scholar, boys." The other bikers chuckled from their stools, their laughter a coarse rumble that fed Snake's bravado, sensing entertainment in the brewing confrontation. Bulldog spun on his stool, his massive frame blocking the neon glow from the bar's signs, his presence a physical weight that seemed to press against the room. "You know what I think about book learning?" Snake continued, his voice sharpening, his face inches from Keanu's. "It's for people who can't handle the real world, who hide behind big words, 'cause they ain't got the balls for reality." Keanu closed his book carefully, slipping a napkin between the pages as a bookmark, his movements deliberate and calm, showing no sign of agitation despite the escalating tension. "Everyone finds wisdom in different places," he said quietly, his voice steady, almost gentle. "Marcus Aurelius was a warrior emperor. He believed philosophy should guide action, not replace it." The response, thoughtful and measured, caught Snake off guard, its calm intelligence a stark contrast to the biker's aggression. Most people either cowered or postured when confronted by the Iron Wolves, But Keanu's reasoned explanation made Snake feel small, foolish in front of his crew, his insecurities flaring under the weight of their expectations. "You trying to make me look stupid?" he snapped, his voice rising, his face flushing with anger as he leaned closer, his breath hot and sour. "Not at all," Keanu replied, his tone unchanged, his eyes meeting Snake's without flinching. "Just sharing what I find interesting." But Snake, fueled by alcohol and the need to save face, was beyond reason, his pride wounded by the stranger's composure. He slammed his beer bottle onto the table, the thud reverberating through the now silent bar, a declaration of intent that sent a ripple of dread through the room. Frank cleared his throat nervously, his hands tightening on the rag he held. "Snake, maybe." Bulldog cut him off with a growl that carried the weight of years of unchallenged authority. "Let Snake handle his business." The room's dynamic had shifted irrevocably, the air charged with the electric tension that precedes violence, a palpable force that seemed to tighten around every occupant. The remaining patrons quietly finished their drinks and slipped out, their movements hurried, their eyes averted, recognizing the signs of an impending brawl. Keanu sat still, his posture relaxed but alert, his hands resting lightly on the table's edge, his fingers positioned with a subtle readiness, his eyes sharp with a focus that belied his calm exterior. To the Iron Wolves, he looked like an easy target, a soft city boy unaware of the danger he faced. What they couldn't see was the predator beneath the surface, a man whose training had forged him into something far more lethal than they could imagine. Snake leaned closer, his face inches from Keanu's, his voice a low snarl. "Stand up, Professor. Time for your education." Keanu met his gaze unflinching, his expression unchanged but his body subtly shifting, his weight forward, his muscles coiled like a spring ready to release. "I don't want trouble," he said, his voice calm but carrying a subtle steel, a warning that Snake, in his drunken haze, failed to heed. Snake laughed, but it was edged with unease, a nervous sound that betrayed his growing discomfort. "Too late for that." He demanded Keanu leave, but Keanu replied simply, "I paid for my drink. I'll finish it and go." The refusal, quiet but firm, was a spark in a powder keg. Enraged, Snake knocked the whiskey glass to the floor, the shatter of glass echoing like a gunshot, amber liquid pooling on the sticky floor. Rick, Danny, and Pete surrounded the booth, their movements practiced, their eyes gleaming with the predatory instinct of a pack circling wounded prey. Keanu's calm broke slightly, his voice low but sharp. "That was unnecessary." Bulldog laughed, his voice booming, accusing Keanu of acting superior, of disrespecting their territory. Keanu insisted he was just reading, minding his own business, but the Iron Wolves, driven by pack dynamics and a history of extortion, drug running, and violence, saw a chance to assert their dominance. Their world was built on fear, and Keanu's restraint was mistaken for weakness, a challenge to their authority that demanded correction. When Snake grabbed Keanu's shoulder, the world seemed to pause, the air heavy with the weight of what was to come. Then, in a blur of motion, Keanu exploded into action, his left hand seizing Snake's wrist in a vice-like grip, his right elbow driving into the biker's solar plexus with surgical precision, robbing him of breath. Rising from the booth, Keanu twisted Snake's arm and slammed him face-first onto the table, the impact shaking the booth, the crack of wood and bone reverberating through the bar. Blood streamed from Snake's nose, his pained groans filling the stunned silence as he lay pinned, helpless, his pride shattered. The remaining bikers froze, their bravado evaporating as they met Keanu's gaze, cold, calculating, the eyes of a predator sizing up its prey. "I tried the easy way," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority, filling the room with a chilling certainty. "But we're doing this the hard way." Bulldog bellowed, "Let him go." But his voice lacked its earlier confidence, the sight of Snake's swift defeat shaking his certainty. Keanu held Snake pinned, his grip unyielding, his body poised with a readiness that spoke of years of disciplined training. "Step back and this ends," he said calmly, his words a lifeline offered to men too drunk on power to take it. The bikers hesitated, their instincts screaming they were out of their depth, but pride and alcohol pushed them forward. Pete, young and eager to prove himself to his brothers, flicked open a switchblade, its blade glinting in the dim light as he advanced with a snarl. "Let's see how tough you are now." The appearance of the weapon shifted the confrontation into lethal territory, the stakes no longer a bar fight, but a matter of life and death. Keanu's expression darkened, the careful control giving way to something more dangerous, a glimpse of the predator within. "Put it away," he said, his voice low, a final warning that carried the weight of inevitability. Pete, Drunk on adrenaline and desperate to impress, lunged, the blade aimed low. Keanu moved with a fluidity that seemed to defy physics, his left hand deflecting the knife, his right seizing Pete's wrist. In one continuous motion, he spun the young biker around, using his own momentum to drive him backward into the nearest wall, the impact rattling the building, shaking dust from the rafters. Pete slumped, blood trickling from his scalp where his head had struck the wood paneling, the knife clattering harmlessly to the floor. Snake struggled beneath Keanu's grip, but Keanu pressed him down with minimal effort, his voice conversational yet chilling. "I count 4 knives, 2 guns, brass knuckles among you. I've been watching since you walked in, military habit." The casual mention of military training sent a shiver through the remaining bikers, their realization dawning that they hadn't cornered a civilian, but a far deadlier force. Keanu continued, his voice steady, each word measured. "Walk away now, take your injured friends, and this ends here. Or keep escalating and discover how much worse this can get." The offer hung in the air, a chance to retreat from a battle they were ill-equipped to fight. But Bulldog, his ego unable to accept defeat, his years of commanding through violence blinding him to reason, charged with a roar, his massive fists aimed at Keanu's head with enough force to crush bone. Keanu sidestepped with minimal effort, grabbing Bulldog's extended arm and redirecting his momentum, sending him crashing through the booth in an explosion of splintered wood and shattered glass. The sound was sickening, bone and flesh meeting unyielding surface, and Bulldog lay motionless among the wreckage, blood pooling beneath his head, his massive frame suddenly fragile, his breathing shallow and labored. 3 down, 2 to go. Danny, his hands trembling, pulled a .38 revolver from behind his back, pointing it at Keanu's chest, his voice cracking with desperation. "You're done, tough guy." Keanu's smile was cold, predatory, a chilling contrast to the chaos around him. "You just made the worst decision of your life." Danny screamed, "I got the gun. I'm in control." But his hands shook violently, sweat beading on his forehead, his bravado crumbling under Keanu's unshakable calm. "My name is John Wick," Keanu said, the words falling like stones into still water, sending ripples of terror through the room. Even in their isolated corner of the criminal world, the Iron Wolves had heard whispers of that name. A killer so relentless, so efficient, that entire crime families trembled at its mention. A boogeyman whose reputation was forged in blood and fear. Danny's finger tightened on the trigger, but the gun clicked, the chamber empty. Keanu moved with blinding speed, twisting the revolver from Danny's grip, the motion so precise that Danny didn't feel it leave his hand until it was too late. Keanu examined the weapon briefly, removing the bullets one by one, letting them fall to the floor with metallic pings that echoed like funeral bells. "Cheap ammunition," he noted, his voice clinical, detached. "Wouldn't have killed me anyway. Just made me angry." Danny staggered backward, his face white with terror, his bravado shattered. Frank, behind the bar, had dialed 911, his fingers shaking as he whispered to the operator, the distant wail of sirens growing closer, cutting through the night air like the cries of approaching banshees. Keanu faced the remaining bikers, his voice cold, unyielding. "You prey on the weak, extortion, drugs, murders. I know your crimes, protection rackets, targeting small businesses, elderly shop owners, immigrant families. The Iron Wolves end tonight." He offered a final choice, his words carrying the finality of a judge's sentence. "Option 1, I finish this, and the Iron Wolves disappear permanently, messily. Your families will never know what happened. Option 2, you turn yourselves in when the police arrive, confess every crime, provide evidence against your network, make restitution to your victims." Danny shook his head, sobbing. "We'd be marked men." Keanu's gaze was unrelenting. "You're already marked. The question is by whom, me or them. My version's quicker." Rick, pressed against the wall, stammered, "We're sorry. We'll leave, never bother you again." Keanu's response was absolute. "Oh, I know you won't. Because tonight, the Iron Wolves cease to exist." The sirens were close now, red and blue lights painting the bar's windows in alternating colors of authority and urgency. Danny broke first, sobbing, "I'll confess, just don't kill me." Rick nodded frantically, his hands raised. "Me too. We'll cooperate." Snake, bloodied and pinned, spat defiance, his voice thick with pain. "I'd rather die than rat." Keanu nodded, his expression unchanged. "Your choice." Police burst through the door, their boots heavy on the floor, finding 3 injured bikers, 2 with hands raised in surrender, and Keanu in his booth, calmly reading meditations as if untouched by the chaos. Frank, emerging from behind the bar, called out, self-defense. They attacked him. Officer Martinez, the first through the door, surveyed the carnage with experienced eyes, his brow furrowed. What happened here? Keanu closed his book, his expression serene, a faint sadness in his eyes. They started a fight. I defended myself minimally. Martinez raised an eyebrow, glancing at the wreckage. Minimal? Keanu's smile was tinged with melancholy. You should see me when I'm not minimal. As paramedics tended to the injured and police took statements, the rain outside resumed, washing blood from the gravel parking lot, carrying it into the darkness. Keanu gathered his helmet and book, slipping out into the storm, his triumph roaring to life as he rode off, leaving behind a legend that would grow in whispers across the criminal underworld. The Iron Wolves, once predators who ruled through fear, had met a monster who hunted their kind, and John Wick's justice was absolute, a force as unyielding as the philosophy he carried in his pocket.